Take a $100 bill out of your wallet right now. Go ahead. If you don't have one, picture it. That green rectangle. Benjamin Franklin staring at you with that smug half-smile. Feel the weight of it, the texture of it. Now ask yourself a question that most people never think to ask. What is this thing actually worth? Not what it can buy. Not what the government says it's worth. What is it in and of itself? The answer is uncomfortable. It is a piece of cotton and linen blend paper. It costs the U.S. government about 14 cents to produce. The ink on it has no intrinsic value. The serial number printed on it is just a tracking code. There is no gold sitting in a vault somewhere with your name on it backing that bill up. There is no silver. There is no commodity of any kind. There is nothing behind that piece of paper except a promise. A promise made by a government that is currently $36 trillion in debt and climbing by roughly $1 trillion every 100 days. And somewhere in a vault in Shanghai, in Moscow, in Mumbai, and in Riyadh, a very different kind of money is sitting quietly. It doesn't promise anything. It doesn't need to. It has been valuable for 5,000 years across every civilization, every empire, and every monetary system that has ever existed and collapsed. It is heavy, it is real, and it is winning. There's a war being fought right now, not with missiles, not with soldiers. It is being fought in the vaults of central banks, in the back rooms of the Bank for International Settlements, in the quiet halls of the Shanghai Gold Exchange, and in the financial decisions of nations that are very slowly, very deliberately turning their backs on the dollar, one bar at a time. The dollar doesn't talk about this war. The financial media doesn't cover it. Your financial advisor doesn't mention it. But the data is there. The purchases are happening. The reclassifications have been made. The alliances are shifting. And by the time most people understand what happened, the game will already be over. Today, we are going to pull back the curtain on the most consequential financial battle of the 21st century. We are going to follow the gold. We are going to expose the suppression. We're going to decode the rule change that quietly remonetized gold while you were watching the stock market. And most importantly, we're going to tell you exactly what to do before the silent war becomes very, very loud. Buckle up. This one is going to change how you see every dollar in your pocket. To understand a war, you have to understand what was stolen. Cast your mind back to 1944. World War II is grinding toward its end. The Allied nations gather at a resort hotel in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. 44 countries send representatives. The agenda is simple and enormous. They need to rebuild the global financial system from the rubble of the war. They need to decide what money means going forward. The result is the Bretton Woods Agreement. And the deal is elegant in its logic. Every major currency in the world will be pegged to the U.S. dollar. Fixed exchange rates, stability, predictability. But here's the critical part, the part that actually gave the system its integrity. The U.S. dollar itself will be pegged to gold at a fixed rate of $35 per ounce. Any foreign government or central bank could walk up to the United States Treasury and exchange their dollars for physical gold. On demand. No questions asked. This meant the dollar wasn't just paper. It was a claim check, a receipt. You hold the paper, we hold the gold, and you can have it back whenever you want. The dollar was trusted because it was redeemable. It was backed by something real. For 2 decades, the system worked. Global trade expanded. The world rebuilt. The American middle class exploded into prosperity. The dollar became the world's reserve currency not through force, but through credibility. Because behind every dollar was a measurable, auditable, finite amount of gold. And then came Vietnam, and the Great Society welfare programs, and the guns and butter economy of the 1960s. America started spending money it didn't have. It started printing dollars faster than it was accumulating gold. Foreign nations, led by the famously shrewd French under Charles de Gaulle, started noticing the math didn't add up. They started doing something completely rational. They started exchanging their dollars for gold before the music stopped. By 1971, the run on Fort Knox was becoming a crisis. America was hemorrhaging gold. President Nixon faced a choice. Cut spending, reduce the deficit, live within the rules of the system, or break the rules. On August 15, 1971, Nixon went on national television and announced that the United States would no longer honor the gold redemption window. Your dollars could no longer be exchanged for gold. Just like that, the tether was cut. The receipt became worthless paper. The promise was broken. Nixon called it a temporary measure. It has now been over 50 years. This moment, which economists politely call the Nixon shock, was the opening shot of the silent war. Because what Nixon did was not just a technical monetary policy adjustment. He declared that America's paper was more trustworthy than gold, that the dollar didn't need a physical anchor, that the world should simply trust the United States government to manage its currency responsibly forever. Gold disagreed, and gold has a very long memory. Here is what most people don't understand about the post-1971 world. The dollar didn't survive the end of Bretton Woods because it earned the world's trust. It survived because it was the only viable option, and because America made it very clear that alternatives were not welcome. We covered the petrodollar system in detail in a previous video, but the short version is this. After 1971, the dollar needed a new anchor. It found one in oil. Through the secret 1974 deal with Saudi Arabia, the U.S. ensured that every barrel of oil sold anywhere in the world would be priced in dollars. This created a permanent artificial demand for the currency. Nations had to hold dollars to buy energy. Dollars flowed back into U.S. Treasury bonds through the recycling loop. The dollar became the operating system of the global economy, not because it was backed by gold, but because it was backed by oil, military power, and the implicit threat of economic isolation for anyone who tried to leave the system. This was genius, but it was also a bluff, because what Nixon created in 1971 was a system built entirely on confidence. Not gold, not silver, not any physical commodity. Just the collective belief that the United States government would not abuse its privilege, that it would not print too much, that it would not weaponize the currency, that it would always pay its debts. For decades, the world played along. The dollar was the cleanest, dirty shirt. Even America's enemies had to use it. Even the people who hated the system had no viable exit. But gold never forgot what it was. And the people who understood money at the deepest level never stopped watching. Because there's a rule in monetary history that has never been broken across 5,000 years of human civilization. Every fiat currency, every currency backed by nothing but government promises, has eventually returned to its intrinsic value, zero. The Roman Empire debased its silver denarius to fund its wars and collapsed. Weimar Germany printed its marks into oblivion and watched wheelbarrows of cash become worthless before lunch. Zimbabwe, Venezuela, Argentina. The pattern repeats with such clockwork regularity that it is no longer a warning. It is a mathematical certainty. The question was never whether the dollar would face this reckoning. The question was always when, and who would be ready. Here is where the story gets real. Here is where you stop looking at economic theory and start looking at what the most powerful financial institutions on the planet are actually doing with their money. In 2022, global central banks purchased 1,136 tons of gold. That was the highest level of central bank gold buying ever recorded, going back to 1950, the highest ever. In 2023, they nearly matched it again, over 1,000 tons purchased. Let that sink in. The people who run the global financial system, the same people who appear on television telling you to diversify into stocks and bonds, the same institutions that manage the reserves of sovereign nations, are buying gold at a pace not seen in the history of modern finance. Who is buying? This is a critical detail. It is not the United States. It is not Great Britain. It is not any Western nation that has a vested interest in maintaining dollar supremacy. The buyers are China, Poland, Singapore, India, Turkey, and a coalition of nations in the global south that watched what happened to Russia's $300 billion in frozen reserves after Ukraine invasion and made a very rational decision. Paper money can be frozen. Paper money can be seized. Paper money can be deleted from a ledger with a keystroke by a government you have no control over. A gold bar sitting in a vault in Beijing or Mumbai cannot be sanctioned. It cannot be frozen. It does not require permission from the U.S. Treasury to exist. The Russia sanctions of 2022 were supposed to be the ultimate demonstration of American financial power. What they actually demonstrated was the opposite. They showed every nation in the world that holding your reserves in dollars or dollar-denominated assets is not safe. It is a hostage arrangement, and the hostage takers will act if they feel threatened. The Global South watched AG20 economy have $300 billion stolen overnight and collectively drew the same conclusion. Get out of paper. Get into gold. The buying spree you are seeing is not speculation. It is not a hedge against inflation, though it is that too. It is a fundamental restructuring of the global reserve system happening in real time, 1 ton at a time. The central bankers are not stupid. They are not sentimental about gold. They are buying it because the math on the dollar system is broken and they know it. The question you should be asking yourself is why they know it and you don't. If you're finding this breakdown valuable and you want to understand more about how the real global economy actually works behind the curtain, hit that subscribe button right now. We cover this kind of analysis every single week, and the algorithm is actively trying to make sure you never see it. Which country do you think is hiding the most gold? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to see what you think before we go any further. Here's a question that should keep you up at night. If central banks are buying gold at record levels, if de-dollarization is accelerating, if the U.S. national debt is at $36 trillion and climbing, if inflation has been running hot for years, why isn't gold at $5,000 an ounce already? The answer is one of the most important and least discussed stories in modern finance. Gold's price has been systematically managed, suppressed, held below where it would naturally trade if the market were actually free. Here's how it works. The price of gold that you see quoted on your phone or on a financial news ticker is not set by the physical gold market. It is set primarily by the paper gold market. Specifically, by futures contracts traded on the COMEX exchange in New York. These are contracts that represent a promise to deliver gold at a future date, but the overwhelming majority of these contracts are never settled in physical gold. They are settled in cash. They are paper promises about gold, not gold itself. The ratio of paper gold to physical gold in the system is staggering. Estimates suggest there are somewhere between 100 and 300 paper claims for every single ounce of physical gold that actually exists. Think about what that means. If even 1% of paper gold holders demanded physical delivery simultaneously, the entire system would collapse instantly because the gold simply is not there. This paper market gives large financial institutions and Western central banks the ability to influence gold's price in ways that will be impossible in a physical-only market. When gold starts rising too fast and threatening to send a panic signal about the health of the dollar, large short positions can be opened in the futures market. Paper selling floods a market. The price is pushed back down. The alarm is silenced. This is not a conspiracy theory. There are documented cases of massive coordinated gold selling at off-market hours, during periods of low liquidity, in volumes that no rational profit-seeking actor would choose. It has been studied by academics. It has been acknowledged in leaked internal documents. The German Bundesbank, as we discussed, had to wait years to get their gold back from the Federal Reserve with bars that had different serial numbers than the ones they deposited. But here is the critical development that is cracking the suppression system wide open. The paper gold market is a Western construct operating through Western exchanges under Western rules. The Shanghai Gold Exchange operates differently. It demands physical settlement. When you buy gold in Shanghai, you get gold, real gold, the metal, not a contract, not a promise. And the volume on the Shanghai exchange has been exploding. As physical demand from Asia continues to overwhelm the paper market ability to suppress the price, the suppression becomes increasingly expensive and increasingly unsustainable. Gold is grinding higher against the wishes of the institutions that prefer it stays quiet. The war is being fought in ounces of physical metal, and the West is slowly running out of ammunition. On June 28, 2021, something happened that received almost no mainstream media coverage. It did not trend on social media. No politician held a press conference about it. No financial news anchor led their broadcast with it. But in the opinion of serious monetary analysts, it was one of the most significant financial events of the last 50 years. The Basel III banking regulations came into full effect. Now I know your eyes are already glazing over. Basel III sounds like a pharmaceutical drug or a Swiss vacation destination. Stay with me, because this is a rule change that quietly put gold back on the throne. Here's the background. The Bank for International Settlements, the BIS, is the central bank of central banks. It sets the capital adequacy rules that all major banks worldwide must follow. These rules determine what assets banks can hold and how much each asset counts toward their safety requirements. In simple terms, the rules determine what counts as real money at the institutional level. For decades, physical gold was classified as a Tier 3 asset. This meant banks could only count 50% of their gold holdings toward their capital requirements. Gold was treated as a risky, speculative asset, less trustworthy than cash, less trustworthy than U.S. Treasury bonds. The rules were essentially designed to disadvantage gold and advantage government debt, which is a remarkable coincidence if you believe in coincidences. Under Basel III, physical gold was reclassified as a Tier 1 asset, the highest classification, equivalent to cash, equivalent to sovereign debt, zero risk weighting. Read that again. The global regulatory framework that governs every major bank on Earth has officially declared that physical gold is as safe as U.S. government bonds. In the language of institutional finance, this is an earthquake. What this means in practice is that banks around the world are now incentivized to hold physical gold to meet their capital requirements instead of paper assets and government bonds. The rule change created an enormous institutional incentive to accumulate physical metal. It was a quiet admission by the very architects of the fiat monetary system that their paper experiment is reaching its limits, and they need to put a solid foundation under the global banking system before the cracks become canyons. The BIS did not send a press release explaining this. They did not call a conference. They changed the rules and moved on. But the implications are enormous. Basel III is a regulatory system telling you, in the driest, most bureaucratic language imaginable, that gold is real money again, that the 50-year experiment of pretending paper was as good as gold is quietly being unwound at the institutional level, even as the public narrative remains unchanged. The institutions are positioning themselves. The question is whether you are. Let's zoom out and look at the battlefield from altitude, because the gold story is not happening in isolation. It is happening against a backdrop of simultaneous and compounding failures in the dollar system that are accelerating the timeline of this war. Round 1. The debt. The United States government currently carries over $36 trillion in national debt. This number is growing by approximately $1 trillion every 100 days. Interest payments on this debt have now surpassed the entire defense budget. The United States is spending more money just to service its credit card bill than it spends on the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Space Force combined. There is no mathematical path to paying this debt off. The only options are default, austerity that no politician will ever run on, or inflation. History tells us governments always choose inflation. Inflation means printing money. Printing money means a dollar buys less. Every dollar printed dilutes the value of every dollar already in existence. Gold, which cannot be printed, benefits directly. Round 2. The weaponization problem. We already covered the Russia sanctions in detail, but the global ripple effect of that decision cannot be overstated. The moment the U.S. froze $300 billion in Russian central bank reserves, every non-Western nation on Earth received the same message simultaneously. Your dollar reserves are not yours. They are permission slips, and those permissions can be revoked without warning or due process. The rational response to that message, which nations across the global south are executing right now, is to reduce dollar exposure and increase gold holdings. The dollar's greatest strength was always trust. That trust has been cracked. It may never fully heal. Wound 3. The BRICS challenge. The coalition of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, now expanded to include Iran, the UAE, Egypt, and others, has openly declared intention to reduce dependence on the dollar system. These nations collectively represent the majority of the world's population and a rapidly growing share of its economic output. They control most of the world's energy, food production, and critical minerals. There's ongoing serious discussion within BRICS about a new reserve asset backed by a basket of commodities. Gold would almost certainly be a component. If even a partial commodity-backed alternative emerges, The demand destruction for dollars would be severe and immediate. Round 4. The technology bypass. New payment systems, central bank digital currencies, and bilateral trade agreements denominated in local currencies are actively being developed and deployed to route around the dollar system. China's petro-yuan mechanism allows oil to be purchased in yuan and immediately converted to physical gold on the Shanghai Exchange. This is a functioning alternative that already processes significant volume. Every barrel of oil sold outside the dollar system is one less unit of artificial demand propping up the currency. The dollar is not going to collapse overnight. It is the reserve currency of the world. It has enormous structural advantages and network effects built over decades. But it no longer has a monopoly. And in the world of finance, once you lose your monopoly, you lose your pricing power. The transition from dominant to merely significant could happen much faster than most people expect, especially if there is a triggering event, a debt crisis, a failed treasury auction, a geopolitical shock that accelerates de-dollarization from a trend into a stampede. Gold does not need the dollar to fail completely to win this war. It just needs the dollar to keep losing ground. And on every front, that is exactly what is happening. We have diagnosed the disease. We have traced the battlefield from the crime of 1971 to the Basel III reclassification, to the central bank buying spree, to the structural wounds bleeding the dollar. So now we get to the most important question of all. What does this mean for you? And what do you do about it? Let me give you a clear-eyed playbook. Step 1. Understand what is actually happening to your savings. If you have money sitting in a savings account earning 4% interest and inflation is running at 6%, you are not saving. You are losing purchasing power at a controlled rate. Every year your money sits in paper. The real goods and services it can purchase quietly shrink. The dollar is not a store value. It never was after 1971. It is a medium of exchange, a toll road, not a destination. Stop treating it like one. Step 2. Get physical exposure to gold, not a gold ETF, not a paper promise. Physical metal. There is a reason central banks are not buying shares in a gold fund. They are buying bars, shipping them, and storing them in their own vaults. The lesson is clear. If you cannot touch it, you do not truly own it. In a systemic crisis, paper claims on gold may be settled in cash at the prevailing price. The metal itself will be worth considerably more. A 5% to 15% allocation of your net worth in physical gold is not paranoia. It is the same logic that every major sovereign wealth fund and central bank in the non-Western world is currently acting on. You are simply joining the trade they have already made. Step 3. Understand the silver opportunity. Silver is gold's volatile younger sibling. It has the same monetary history and the same appeal as a physical asset that cannot be printed. But it also has enormous industrial demand from solar panels, electric vehicles, and electronics manufacturing that is growing rapidly. Historically, in major gold bull markets, silver outperforms gold significantly because its smaller market size means capital flows move the price more dramatically. In a currency crisis, silver is also more practical for everyday transactions because of its lower price per unit. Step 4. Think in purchasing power, not in dollar amounts. Stop asking how many dollars your house is worth. Ask how many ounces of gold your house is worth. Stop asking what your salary is in dollars. Ask what it buys. When you price things in gold rather than in a currency that is being continuously debased, you get a much clearer picture of whether you are actually getting richer or simply watching the numbers go up while your real wealth quietly erodes. Step 5. Reduce exposure to long-duration bonds. U.S. Treasury bonds are a contract where you lend money to the most indebted government in human history at a fixed interest rate for up to 30 years and hope that they don't inflate your repayment into worthlessness. In an era of structural deficits and monetary debasement, holding government bonds is not conservative investing. It is accepting guaranteed purchasing power loss in exchange for the illusion of safety. The institutions that understand what is coming are rotating out of bonds and into real assets. You should be asking your financial advisor some very uncomfortable questions about your bond allocation. Step 6. Pay attention to the signals. You do not need to predict exactly when this transition happens. You need to watch the signals. Central bank gold purchases accelerating. Foreign treasuries selling increasing. New bilateral trade agreements bypassing the dollar multiplying. BRICS expansion continuing. U.S. debt to GDP ratio climbing. Each of these is a data point. Each of these is a signal flare being sent up by the institutions that know more than we do. When you see all of these signals flaring simultaneously, as we're seeing right now, that is not coincidence. That is the map of a monetary transition in progress. The silent war between the dollar and gold is not a theory. It is not a fringe idea promoted by people who store freeze-dried food in their basement. It is the observable, documentable, data-supported story of a 50-year monetary experiment reaching its mathematical limits. It is the story of an empire that broke its own rules in 1971 and has been paying the compound interest on that decision ever since. Gold is not rising because people are scared. Gold is rising because the institutions that understand money at the deepest level have quietly decided that the dollar's 50-year reign as the unchallenged global reserve is entering its final chapter. They are not making this announcement. They are making this trade. The dollar will not disappear tomorrow. It will not go to zero next month. The transition from one monetary era to the next takes years, sometimes decades. But the direction is set. The architecture is being built. The gold is being accumulated. And when the tipping point arrives, whether it is a debt crisis, a failed auction, a geopolitical shock, or a BRICS announcement that changes the rules of the game overnight, the people holding paper will look for a seat and find that the chairs have been rearranged. The silent war is being won one gold bar at a time, in vaults that the financial media doesn't cover, by institutions that don't hold press conferences. The question is not whether gold wins. The question is whether you are holding any when it does. If this video gave you a clearer picture of what is actually happening to your money, do me a favor and hit that like button. The algorithm actively buries this kind of content because it does not come with a paid sponsor telling you everything is fine. Your like is the only thing that pushes it out to people who need to hear it. And subscribe if you want to stay ahead of the next shift before it shows up on the front page of the newspaper. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Are you already stacking gold? Do you think the dollar survives the next decade? Are you a gold skeptic who thinks I am completely wrong? I want to hear from all of you. The best comments get pinned. Stay skeptical, stay informed, and keep stacking.